Hi again for the second episode of the JA Malta Podcast, the Work Readiness series. Last time we discussed what documents and how can someone prepare and start thinking about looking for a job. Today we'll be discussing about the job search, how to make it more efficient, how to be precise or dedicated to what you really want, as well as preparing your CV and covering letter. And we have other episodes lined up, so stay tuned to these episodes to learn more about getting your first job. Today I'm joined by Fran, Moisa and Aimee Chetcuti to discuss the job search, CVs and covering letters. So would you like to introduce yourself, Aimee, first?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having us here. I come from Deloitte, so my role is part of the People and Purpose team there, and I form part of the recruitment team over there. So that is, I think, one of the...
So you saw a lot of CVs.
We see too many.
Fran?
Good morning. Thank you for having me. I'm Fran Moisa. I'm a headhunter and talent advisor. I run my own business here in Malta called 𝗟𝗶𝗀𝗁𝗵. And I'm also launching another business called Sivenorem, focused on the non-executive director business networking market.
Excellent. Good luck with that.
Thank you.
So I'd like to inform the guests here. So what we do to kick this off, these episodes off, we ask you some quick fire round questions, one-word answers, just to break a bit the ice. So first of all, maybe let's start with respect to your LinkedIn photo. Mm-hmm. Would you go for a smiling, cheerful photo or a serious face, professional face photo?
Smile.
I have a serious one. Actually, I think a bit too serious.
Searching for a job, would you go for a particular niche or more of a broad search as if it was your first job?
Niche.
Broad.
And on your CV, you go for something neutral tones, plain colors, plain format, or more bold and colorful?
Plain.
Searching for a job, would you go for something that hits more on your passionate side or your drive, or what the market needs and the salary, so more pragmatic approach?
For me, it's passion.
More passion, but also a bit of the other as well, a combination, but leaning more towards passion.
Paper-based CV, PDF, or more of an online portfolio link website, where would you go?
We're still at the CV stage, I think.
Yes.
More paper-based, the PDF.
The PDF.
PDF, yes.
Excellent. Thanks for that. A good initial round discussing CVs and job search, and we'll dig it deeper now. So, Fran, if I start with you, so if I'm looking for my first job, how should I go about it in terms of preparing myself as what do I want to do? What career path should I go for? What should I take into consideration?
So it's important, I call it the 3-3-1 rule, essentially. So think of 3 areas that you're really, really good at. It could be writing, it could be speaking, it could be driving, I don't know. Something that you're really, really, really good at, but you have to be able to demonstrate those skills. So if it's your first job, you probably have demonstrated them in your academic or your extracurricular activities or within a social setting, for example, communication skills. And you need to outline those. I go for 3 because 3 are manageable, they're easy to remember, and you can focus. When you start adding more, they dilute in essence. essentially. Then think of 3 things that you don't like or do not resonate with you or are alien to you. So, for example, in my case, it would be mathematics. So I would never go for a job that would involve a high degree of mathematics because it doesn't speak to my skills nor my passion. So you have the reverse. You have what you're good at and what you're less good at. And the other one, so 3-3-1 rule is what's important for you. But it has to be one thing. We have the tendency to start listing a lot of things, family, etc. But in the context of a job, one thing that you will not compromise on, you have to identify that, and you have to benchmark then the jobs that you're looking for against that. Because if your one thing is, for example, training opportunities, which should, especially if it's your first job, to have access to training. But you go into a business or a role where training is sporadic or it's not really tailored to what you want to do, you're going to suffer. So your motivation is going to lower and you're going to suffer from burnout. That's why it's important to identify that one thing that you will not compromise on and benchmark against those.
Excellent. And when looking for a job, your first job or even maybe the second, how important is to look at it from a career path? Or should I say, listen, this is my first job, so kind of let me take it and experiment? Sort of what would be the balance there?
I think there's merit in both. That's why even when you ask me the quick fire question, passion, or career, there's merit in both in the sense that you need to have a sense of direction. Okay, so for example, you need to understand whether your job is going to exist in a few years' time. For example, that's why it's important to look at it from a career context. Is this job going to be in demand? Or I'll give you a very basic example. When I was young, I wanted to be a philosopher, and no one hires part-time philosophers, I've been told. Could I have made a career out of it? Maybe, I don't know. But was it realistic at that time with the skills and what I had to do? Not that much. So it's important you understand the context of what you want to do and whether it will give you the rewards. And I'm not speaking only of monetary rewards in terms of salary, but also in terms of tenure, in terms of stability to be fulfilled. Because if you don't have those, you will become stressed, unless of course you have loads of money and these things are just secondary to your day-to-day. And I forgot now what you asked me. I've answered half of the question and there was the other half.
In terms of whether it's something that you should take as a first job to experiment or the...
I think experimenting is also good. You will always have a degree of experimenting in any job, whether it's your first, second, third or whatever. And it's good to go with an open mind, but have a finality in mind as well. So it's good to go with that open mind to experiment in terms of learning how to be adaptable, how to be flexible, how to turn your hands at different things and understand how different things function in the context of a business. But naturally, you look at it from a bird's eye view and then you start to go niche, to specialize.
Excellent. Aimee, we heard from Fran to talk about things you like, things you don't like, or what you're looking for. Is this content for a covering letter, for a CV? So how can I make my documents reflect my personality? How can I make them compelling using what Fran was saying? Or should I use something else?
No, definitely you would need to somehow transmit your personality through the documents you're putting forward. I think most times the majority of that needs to go into your CV, because I feel like either way, that is what's going to be read the most, I feel. And that's what's going to be taken forward through the recruitment process. Definitely, when you're putting that on your CV in terms of personality, in terms of passions and so on, you also need to tie it in with whatever you're applying for. So for me, first of all, don't apply for something if you're not passionate about it. So I don't know, if you're passionate about the sports industry, don't go into the automotive industry or vice versa. But then also make sure that that is transmitted through the content of whatever documents you're putting forward, and also how you're portraying yourself online, on social media, on LinkedIn, maybe. So
what are the key elements in a CV that I should really highlight? So how should I structure it to bring out the best from a point of view of a recruiter seeing my CV? Is there a particular must-haves? Are there a particular structure that you would suggest?
Yes, definitely. If we're talking about someone who's, 18 years old, for example, either about either have just started university or just leaving their education in some way, shape or form, and they're looking for their first job. At that point in time, I would definitely prioritize whatever experience you've gained up to that point. And you might tell me at 18, what experience would you have gotten? Well, I hope you'd have gotten some kind of experiences by then, either through voluntary work, extracurriculars, maybe hobbies, and maybe work. You know, some people would have started working at that point in time. If you're at university or anywhere for that matter, make sure a person needs to make sure that they are being active so that they have something to add to that CV. And then I would also look at education. I think at that age, unfortunately, there is only so much you can compare with when it comes to candidates. So I would add the whatever education you have up until that point. I would think at 16 years old, for example, grades do matter because there are only so many things you can weigh when it comes to candidates. So I would look at, for example, what they've studied, and perhaps as an addendum, I would have the grades, for example. So those are some of the things I would put forward.
Okay.
Later on in the careers, I think that answer would change.
Yes, because obviously then you need to tailor, and you mentioned it already, every submission of CV needs to be tailored to that particular role, right? There's no generic format that should be used.
Yeah, yes.
And in terms of a covering letter, how important is that, or what should fit in a covering letter?
To be honest, I think nowadays, at least my perspective, but the cover letter is starting to be a bit phased out in the sense of perhaps you're not having a second attachment as a cover letter. Perhaps whatever content you are going to put in the cover letter, instead you put it in an email, for example, which is one way of applying for jobs nowadays. Or sometimes it's not through email, sometimes you're sending a LinkedIn message to the CEO. You know, and so whatever you would put in a cover letter, you'd put in the LinkedIn message, and of course you need to change it because no one's gonna read a paragraph, 2 papers long. So I think the concept of cover letter is changing. The cover letter originally was to introduce your CV. Nowadays,
so that should be moved to the email content.
It's changing. Exactly.
And when it comes to sort of a question to both of you, when it comes now to more automated job applications where there's a system that I need to fill in, are there any special tricks, techniques or tips that you can share to be sort of a key one that shows up when there's hundreds of CVs? Sort of any particular one tip that you would share maybe?
Sure. So I think from my end, when it comes to the design of the CV, you need to be aware of whatever icons you put in, for example, because the system cannot read that very well. It is a system. So I don't know if you put a bullet point, for example, there are some which it completely ignores and it will jumble up all the information. And the CV, when it comes to the recruiter, looks like it won't look like the CV you put in, let's put it that way. Okay. And then also I would make sure that you are putting in certain keywords that relate to the job description. There are systems nowadays that through AI essentially compare the CV with the job description that's put into the system. So if the system is not picking up some kind of alignment, it might put you in a, in the reject pile, for example.
Yes. Okay.
So that is definitely something to keep in mind.
Fran, now you mentioned it before, and I'm gonna tap into that again about training or something. What you look for in a job. So when it comes to training and lifelong learning or keeping yourself updated, how should I do that in line with a career path? So if I choose a career path, should I take a proactive role in that case? Is it something the employer should cater for me to keep updated? From a candidate perspective, how do you look at this continuous training or educating yourself?
My advice is to take it upon yourself. Naturally, the employer plays a part in all of this, particularly when it comes to technical training. So if it's your first or second job, usually they will have some form of a buddy system, for example, where you shadow a more experienced professional to learn from them, or you will attend particular courses for the type of role that you do to understand the ins and outs a little bit better. However, in in the context of your career, you are in control. And it's very important to be aware of that and to take that very seriously, because as I said, as much as the company can offer you some tools towards that, your professional development, your improvement and your growth, it is up to you. So one of the most important skills that you can develop that are outside of the technical area, so how to do your job correctly and well, is your communication skills, your people skills, communication, any type of communication, written or verbal, and other what we would categorize as soft skills. Essentially, those have to come a lot from your end, and it's important that you take those very seriously, as particularly soft skills are decreasing. There were numerous studies across the board from universities, from companies, from advisory firms, whereas they have identified that employers struggle with high-level soft skills. And this is something that can definitely set you apart, especially if you're at the beginning of your career. So, for example, communication skills, learning how to communicate well, will serve you incredibly well throughout your interview process, throughout your evaluation process, especially when you don't have any experience to back it up.
And these are things you can get them from school and education, but it's more also from your lifestyle, your taking on opportunities of things to do, voluntary or working with other group of people that in line with your passion, that you get to work in a team, you get to enjoy that social interaction, so that you improve on this communication.
Yes.
So that kind of closes off a bit the area of the CV and the job search, the career path and sort of the strategies behind it. So just to break a bit the ice a bit more, I'll ask you for one quick funny story, fun instance you had maybe in doing interviews, seeing CVs, anything that when it happened it really made you surprised or shocked or gave you an opportunity to laugh in a CV you saw. Anything to share?
Well, from my end, a funny story I have happened many years back. I think I was still at university, but I was still, funny enough, working in recruitment for a different organization, and a neighbor left her CV on my car wipers instead of applying directly or knocking on the door, and I just can't not think about that.
So you thought it was a fine, probably, or
for example, I thought, who left this paper, but then
I have to look at it.
It was a CV. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting way of getting in touch with your recruiter, Fran.
Not a bad way, I must say.
Yeah, definitely arrived.
You definitely read it as well. Yes. I don't know, when you're put on the spot like this, my mind goes blank, completely blank.
Nothing in particular?
There are a few. I'm not sure they would be necessarily appropriate to disclose here. Okay, but maybe something I've done during my first interviews. So, for example, when you get asked this question, tell me about yourself. When I was first asked this question, I told them my life story. I was bored, they were bored, I was embarrassed, they were uncomfortable. So, yeah, that was a bit of a... Oh, God, story. Yes, it was embarrassing. So I will never forget it.
It's something you would suggest for candidates to do or to avoid?
Not to do, I was born at a very young age. Great.
It was a sunny day. Excellent. So thanks for sharing that, Fran. If we were to move to another part of this episode, I wanted to talk more about the searching. So when looking for a job, where should I look for a job, or what are the techniques I need to take on looking for a job? Any particular tips from that end? Depends
on the type of job you're looking for. There are slight degrees of variation, but usually for professional service types of roles, so office-based types of roles, particularly if it's your first job, it's important to network, I would say. So attending conferences that are relevant to the sector that you're interested in. A lot of them offer student discounts or even free for students, so you can take advantage of those things. Professional social media. In Malta, the most popular one being LinkedIn, but also taking care of your non-professional social media such as Facebook, Instagram or Twitter. I would say that a lot of the searches that we have nowadays are online, so you will find instances, isolated instances, but you will find instances of professional putting out not particularly savory stuff on social media. I'm not talking here about jokes or stuff like that. I'm talking about very disparaging comments towards people or actions. It's very easy to get heated up on a keyboard, but you have to remember it stays there and it can create, it will reflect badly on you. I wanted to say it creates the wrong impression of you, but if that's who you are, that probably it's an accurate impression. So you need to be aware of what you put out there. So networking, conferences, social media presence for LinkedIn. Also networking with recruiters, but make sure they do specialize in entry-level jobs or graduate-level jobs, so you ensure that they can represent you, so you don't get disheartened, and they can guide you appropriately. And also I always recommend, think of 10 companies that you admire, that you would like to work for. You admire for various reasons. I don't know, they have cool products or cool services. They are in a location that you really love. Whatever it may be that works for you, and approach those companies. And when you approach them, as Aimee was saying earlier, in your cover letter or email or whatever you want to call it, say, I'm really interested in this because, and give a very personalized reason. That's very powerful and personal. So these are the tips I would give. If it's a role that is, for example, related to hospitality or other areas like that, so that are not office based, then probably your best bet is to actually go to those businesses and approach them directly, or again look for a recruiter that specializes in entry-level jobs in those industries. Digital presence for those industries tends to be slightly on the lower side. They rely more on direct applications or sourcing channels. So here it depends on the area that you want to specialize.
Fran mentioned sort of the proactiveness from the candidate to approach companies as opposed to waiting for a vacancy to show up. Do you have that same feel sort of from someone who's recruiting people all the time? How do you see someone approaching you directly at Deloitte to come and work there? Is it something you welcome? Do you see it as someone who's, do you say this person is pushy, or how would you evaluate that?
Yeah, no, we don't see it as pushy. On the contrary, I feel like candidates who somehow approach you, for example, during an event, tend to stand out. You have to keep in mind that sometimes for one vacancy you receive 200 CVs. So that is a really easy way to stand out, when you're at a conference and someone tells you, listen, this is something I'd like to do. Any tips for when I apply next week? Or any tips, because I sent you my CV last week, right? And those are definitely ways to, to pop out. And definitely we end up somehow giving them a bit more attention because of that. Because of that approach. So
you would encourage a lot the networking aspect, so not purely relying on online applications and job boards, but that face-to-face interaction, try to meet the individual at conferences. So any tips on that, on how to approach that individual at a conference, or how can I go about it in a tactful way? So
before we say anything, let's put one statement that it's not very easy to do at that age, to be so confident and to approach a random stranger, and just say, listen, I want to do this, or I'd love to work at your company. It's not easy, but I think, that confidence and that confidence, call it confidence, that confidence to do that, you're building it up throughout your years. But then when you do when you do it, make sure you have your things ready, perhaps have a bit of a business card, or nowadays at least have a contact somehow to share LinkedIn. Nowadays I do it with my phone, one tap, and you can share your profile, for example, if you want to. So I think just being available, just showing some flexibility, perhaps ask for a coffee, or just ask, listen, can I just have a couple of tips from you, because I'd love to work at company X, and just going.
And would be important, I guess, to do some research before, rather than approaching everyone. You need to to show that you're approaching that individual because it's that company and not because it's any company.
Yes. And ideally, if you're approaching someone, have an idea of who you're talking to, so you can tailor what you're saying to that individual.
Excellent. Anything else to add, Fran?
Yes, I do agree that it may be quite hard to go up and approach people. So it's not necessarily the easiest thing in the world. But one way to make it easier is making it about the subject of the conference or them rather than about you. It's also more palatable for the person being approached. If one approaches you out of nowhere and say, can you give me some tips? Me personally, I'm slightly put off by that. Not completely, but I am a bit, because it puts me a bit on the spot, But if you ease into the conversation, so let's say you just heard a speech on stage at the conference and speaking with the person next to you, what do you think of that? Or I really liked what X said. What is your opinion? And then you ease into the other parts. It warms up a little bit the relationship. It also, even if you don't speak to people, let's say you're really shy and then you don't have that courage yet, that's fine. Still go to the conference and you can put on your CV that you attended X conference, and you will still know more than you having sat at home and done nothing. For example, you will learn the name of a new speaker, you will learn something interesting about the industry, and at worst it gets you out of the house and gives you something to put on your CV, and at best it expands your horizons.
Even
and
at interviews you can bring in
you can bring it
something
up,
you've heard at a conference to share.
You need to be able to have intelligent conversations that are topical, and conversations that go both ways, not just one way. One of the main mistakes even companies make, not only job seekers, is that they focus a lot on them, what I want. You also need to understand what the other person wants as well.
Yeah, and in line with this networking opportunities physically in events, the online presence, we mentioned LinkedIn, we mentioned approaching people. Any tips now on the online presence? What to make sure that your online presence is prepared, what to have, what not to have, and also how to approach people online. Any tips on that front?
From my end, when it comes to your friend said professional social media, for me, just keeping up with what's happening, and if possible, adding a bit your perspective to it, where you've been, what you're doing, what you've studied. It can be anything. Some, content can be created anyways. And, if at least you're showing that you have a thought about it, an opinion about it, that's already a good first step. When it comes to the not so professional social media, like the Facebook, the Instagram, the TikTok, love it or hate it, it's still public most times, and people will look at it, whether you like it or not, and they will create that perception of you before you even step through the door for an interview, which is not ideal. We should not be having biases, but that is the truth. Like you've taken that step to have it public, so I would definitely be super aware of what we're putting out there, because
even sharing content of any articles you read and you want to take pointers from it, it shows that you're keeping yourself updated. So I think I can resonate with that in terms of preparation for the job. It's not just attending the interview, but holistically your persona, your online presence needs to be prepared. When it comes then to moving careers, or we mentioned experimenting on your first job. How is it looked at, or how can I prepare for any questions of when I moved jobs or when I swapped careers and I was working in one field and I moved to another. What's the approach there? How are people looking at that? And how can I, although it happens, prepare for any questions that I'm given?
Depends on the reasons as to why one moves jobs. My advice is, before you decide to switch jobs, understand what's happening in your current job, in the sense of what's not working out. What is the reason that I want to move out of this job? Because you may find yourself that certain things can be resolved through a discussion with your current employer, and you can continue to grow with them. Or you may find that certain things are not resolved, and that's when you have to move on. But what this sort of exercise does, if those things cannot be resolved in the current context, you know what to look out in the next job as to not repeat the same mistake. A very common mistake that professionals make, regardless of the career level they are at, so this is very funny, is that they tend to use generic terms for switching jobs. I was thinking for a new challenge. A new challenge. What does a new challenge mean? Climbing a mountain is a challenge. Eating a whole cake in one sitting is a challenge, which I achieved. So what I'm trying to get to here is that generic terms will lead you to generic jobs and you repeat the same mistakes. So you have to identify what doesn't work. You need to see whether there's an opportunity to correct it, because that will help you to address concerns, that will help your communication skills, that will help your conflict management skills, that will help your interaction skills, which are necessary in any job. Then when you do move, once you've exhausted this and you understand it fully, you are able to articulate that to the next employer without being disparaging towards any previous factors. So if you're looking for a different management style, focus on the style of management that you want. You don't need to say that my ex-manager was X, because that is your perception, in all honesty. I'm not saying some people are not, bad or they haven't made mistakes, But you need to be able to look at it from, I call it, from the bystander's point of view. You look at it objectively and you focus on that. So articulate it to make sure it makes sense. Keep it short, and how it ties in with your next role. So I'm looking for a new role because I would like to learn more about AI, for example. Your business is involved in AI projects. Where I am at the moment, we don't have that focus. So I would like to learn more. Yeah. That's a valid reason. Right, okay. So that's how it works in general.
And does this also apply for any gaps? I mean, in my CV, in my employment history, if I have gaps, do I preempt it and explain them in my CV or interview, or do I leave it for sort of do not highlight it even more? What's your take on that?
No, listen, naturally, when someone is preparing for an interview, they're going to look at where you've been, how long, and so on. So a gap, in my opinion, I think you should preempt it and have a bit of at least an answer prepared just in case it does come up. Regardless, whatever you put on your CV, have an answer for why, how, whatever. It doesn't have to be just the career gap. But definitely, I don't think anyone should not. I think people with career gaps can bring quite a bit to the table, because it means they've done something else other than, work. However, definitely have that prepared, so that in the interview you can actually take advantage of whatever you brought to it, rather than the alternative.
Agreed. So it's time for us to wrap up. So if you had to give one takeaway each, on what we've discussed, what would be the one thing you would sort of repeat or tell the people to listen to again or look more about? So what would be your one takeaway you'll ask our listeners to take on from today?
I think from my end, if there's something that any young person looking to start their career should take away, is starting to think about what portfolio they're bringing to the table, or what they'd like to be in the future eventually. And so to start building that that persona of
Mhm.
whatever career, industry, whatever they want to
To
work
work in.
in. So if that's sports, then think about how you're going to get involved in that. If that is fashion, think how you're going to get in that. If it's professional services, you know what, do something like the company program, for example.
Yeah.
So start building your persona from now, because it's going to pay off
Excellent.
in 5 years' time.
Fran?
I was trying to think, I have so many. It's hard now to pick just one. I think more general advice, not necessarily just to the CV and job searching strategies, that, you know, excellency is expensive. So if you want to excel at something, it's going to cost you something. It's going to cost you your time, your energy, your involvement, your skills. If you're not prepared for taking this seriously, intentionally, and understanding it's hard work, you will find it very hard. So it's important you decide whether you want to be mediocre or excellent.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Fran, Aimee, for joining us. I'll also thank the Malta Council for Voluntary Sector, the VOPS scheme, and the Ministry for Inclusion, Voluntary Organisation and Consumer Rights for supporting us on this podcast. Also, thank you to Deloitte for supporting as one of our main partners here at JA. I thank you for joining us, the listeners and viewers, and we encourage you to join us also on the next episode, where we will be discussing the interviews in depth, and obviously to follow us on our social media, on our online networks, where we will be giving additional information, tips, and also information about our upcoming events. So thank you once again.